it's not a secret that the current mood of the community is not the best. Like, as a fan site, we are reading a lot of comments, watching videos, and so on. And to be honest, it's really frustrating to see the negativity about almost every aspect of the game, especially because we do work with such a passion about what you do and stuff like that. And what do you think? Why is this extreme since the release of Battle for Azeroth? Because we don't really understand why it is like this. I don't know if it's easy to answer or if you want to answer or something.
It's definitely not easy to answer. It's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about myself. It's frustrating and honestly painful even. Exactly. All of us who are making this game, part of the joy of working in the industry that we do and getting to work on a game like World of Warcraft is, our goal is to make people happy. We want to bring people pleasure, fun experiences, and escapes, and just a world of magic. And I think, obviously, we're human. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. We try to admit, recognize those mistakes, learn from them, and improve things going forward. There's one thing that I could stress to the community. It's that, God, do we care? Like, we care deeply about this. Everyone on the team, 300 people on the team, we are out there on Reddit and Twitter and the official forums and fan sites, reading all the comments, and we understand that a lot of it, comes from a place of it comes from a place of pain almost. It comes from a place of passion. People feel like there's this game they love that they have a deep connection to, and there's something about it that's going in a direction that they don't like, that's frustrating to them. They find themselves not looking forward to logging in the way they used to, and lash out. It comes from a place of emotion. And that's a testament to the deep connection people have to World of Warcraft as a game. And it's a challenge for us to fix it. And I think one of the challenges with World of Warcraft, and it actually touched on this recently in the most recent live Q&A, is there are very diverse audiences and playstyles that exist and coexist within Azeroth in WoW. And often, when players may accuse us of being out of touch, it's not that we don't understand their concerns and don't understand what they would like the game to be. The problem is that we're also trying to keep in mind another half dozen groups of players who may want the game to be different things and often directly opposing things. And we're also thinking about the long-term future and how these systems and how these changes are going to play out in the long run. Now, I don't blame players for this. Players have every right to just focus on their own experience. If all you care about is high-end PvP, I don't expect you to, say, okay, I'm having less fun, but I'm okay with this because some other player out there is having more fun as a result. It's okay to be upset. But the only thing I would like to stress is we care. Like, this isn't a situation where we're sitting back and we're like, okay, well, whatever. This is something that actively is occupying a large amount of our attention, and we want nothing more than for everyone to be as happy as possible. And then, in terms of why, parts of it are also just. I don't mean this to sound like in any way an excuse or deflecting blame. I think the internet in general is a place that's become a bit more polarized, a bit more prone to just extreme viewpoints, and it's more about getting anger and opinions out there and less about finding common ground and looking for places of agreement. And I think you see that across a wide range of subjects, politics certainly. And so I think all of those things have culminated in the situation that we see. There's a lot that we're proud of in Battle for Azeroth. I also want to make it clear that I'm not sitting here, apologizing for everything. There's a ton of great work the team has done. We just went into Battle of Dazar'alor a few days ago, and I think it's, great reception from the community there. Tons of fun being had on both Horde and Alliance sides, and we have, a very bright future ahead of us with the majority of Battle for Azeroth's patch content still to come. We're just in Tides of Vengeance. 815 is on the PTR. If you think back to this time in Legion, there was much more to follow. And as much as possible, we're focused on learning from mistakes that we made with systems and rewards at the start of Battle for Azeroth. And I think there's been a lot of work done in Tides of Vengeance to correct those so far, and even more to follow.
Thank you. It seems like one of the bigger complaints of the community was the endgame itemization. On the one hand, the community needs to catch-up things for new players and alts. And on the other hand, it feels like there are no real advantages for players who are playing the game real intense day after day. And yes, of course, we are playing the game to have fun with or without our friends, for example, in raids and PvP. But the good gear progression should also be a part of the game. And we would like to know if why there was this change between classic Burning Crusade and stuff, where you had this progression, if you know what I mean. I hope.
Yes,
so.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, so I think that's, to some extent, that's the way the game has been really for the last 10 years. I think you're right in calling out classic and Burning Crusade as a different era. I think really it was Wrath of the Lich King when Trial of the Crusader came out in patch 3.2 back then, and that gear was a strict replacement to Old War gear. That was probably the first time that there was no need to go back and do old content. And that's part of striking the balance that I was talking about in my answer to the prior question, where it's important that gear matters, it's important that power matters, progression feels great, but we also want the game to remain accessible to people who are joining a bit later or who are coming back. And that's not just in the interests of those players, it's also in the interests of guilds. Like all through Burning Crusade, the period that you ask about, guilds complained bitterly about having to, go back and get people attuned in Serpent Shrine and Tempest Keep, and the fact that when they wanted to recruit a new raider or someone was coming back, they had to, go back and do this content that felt irrelevant to them. Those were huge hurdles that actually made it much harder to recruit, made it much harder to get into raiding as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so, being able to, if you come back and you want to do Battle of Dazar'alor today, maybe you didn't play since September or you didn't play Battle for Azeroth at all, you can't just jump in right away. But there's a faster path to get to the point where you'll be able to contribute than spending 3 or 4 months, clearing Uldir every week and doing Mythic Plus. Very recently, I would say, in Tides of Vengeance, that there was kind of an exceptional case there where that patch introduced catch-up mechanisms designed to get people ready for Battle of Dazar'alor. But Battle of Dazar'alor didn't open until this week, in large part because of the holiday season. And that was just a timing issue. I think it's very likely that in Rise of Ashara, in the next tier, we'll see the raid open immediately after the patch, maybe just a couple of weeks after. So there won't be this large gap. And so I agree that having the Tides of Vengeance catch-up mechanisms in place when the only current raid content was Uldir felt like maybe we were giving away a bit too much compared to the raid, but that was more of a one-time thing than a long-term philosophy change.
Okay, cool, thanks. We know that you talked about the Whaler points yesterday in your question and answering. It was about upgrading gear pieces and item progression and stuff. But we would like to know why there is no different currencies anymore to purchase gear, like a bit comparable to the option of buying Azerite pieces now in Battle for Azeroth. And because that's something cool. You just work for something and you can just buy an item every week or two. Why don't we have something like that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, so we have the Titan Residuum for Azerite armor. In Legion we had Nether Shards and the Veiled Argonite on Argus as part of the patch content there. It's definitely not something we've completely moved away from. I think ideally there is a place for that. We'd like to strike a balance where there is some loot that you get randomly. You kill a boss and hopefully your item drops, and then on the other hand you have this system of guaranteed progression that you can work towards through currencies. We probably can do more for that, particularly on the raid and dungeon side. And I think on the PvP side right now, Conquest provides that guaranteed gear track where no matter what, that as you earn Conquest, you will earn all of these rewards, which is then complemented by end of match rewards and your weekly chest rewards if you're doing rated PvP that give you a chance at exciting upgrades.
Mm. Maybe it's a bit early to ask this question, but if you could change 2 or 3 things prior BFA release, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. Depends on how far back I can go with my time machine. I think a lot of what we did in Tides of Vengeance reflects the lessons we learned and some of the regrets from the launch of Battle for Azeroth. It's changes to systems like islands, like on expeditions, like Azerite armor, a lot of tuning there. And so I think a lot of those concerns revolve around, the initial tuning and structure of those systems. Going back even further, I think there are some more fundamental issues with the Azerite armor system that players have done a good job of pointing out, and that we are looking to really pivot away from and correct with Rise of Ashara. I think we're happy with it from a customization perspective, from the perspective of making items that have greater depth and are more interesting than our traditional helms or shoulder pieces that just have crit or haste or mastery, where you can actually choose from a number of different options. And especially with the new system with 5 rings and Tides of Vengeance, you can pick many more different combinations and emphasize one aspect of your class versus another. That's, I think, an interesting and successful system. The progression of unlocking those traits through earning artifact power, I think, was a little bit of a mismatch with that system. And so that's why, as we look ahead to Rise of Ashara, we just want to keep the armor pieces fully unlocked and have a different avenue for progression in the Heart of Azeroth at artifact itself.
Yeah, we are looking forward to it because it sounds really interesting.
That is our hope.
Okay, let's talk about the current stuff and the patch 8.1.
Sure.
Season 2 has just begun and the new raid is a real blast. Although raid tests already have been fun, it was even more fun to play the encounters on the live servers. And there are a lot of new and unique mechanics, like the Treasure Guardian with his golems and traps and stuff like that. What's your favorite fight in the new raid, if you can say something about that?
I've obviously, other than internal testing, I've also just done it the one time with my guild this week. So at least from heroic mode, probably tied between Opulence and Mechatorque. The Treasure Guard, I think that I really like the way the split raid works out. It reminds me of doing something like Thorum back in Ulduar a long time ago, right? Where you have your separate group going down a hallway with their unique set of challenges. Just very cool flavor. Really integrates the environment. And then Mechatorque is just a fun fight. You're fighting the King of the Gnomes, and the whole dynamic of frantically calling out what color people are to help them defuse their robots. That's just a ton of fun and a new aspect of communication and coordination.
And it's a pretty cool fight. It's like the mechanics are... I don't know, I really like Mechatorque, yeah. In addition to the battle for Dazalaror... Sorry, I can't really pronounce his name.
Neither can we. I'm sorry. Blame the trolls.
Okay, cool. There is also the smaller Crucible of Storm Raid in Season 2. Can we expect it to open with the release of patch 8.15? And can you tell something about the rewards? Like, it's not the higher raid tier, so what can we expect?
So... I think definitely that the Crucible serves as a bridge between Battle of Dazar'alor and Rise of Ashara and the raid content that's going to come there. So I'd expect it to open later on during the tier. Not necessarily directly when 8.15 launches, but probably not too long after that. I think we'll see. As far as the rewards, the item level on that isn't quite final yet. I think we're going to look at where the player base is as a whole. I mean, it's only a 2-boss raid, so it wouldn't surprise me if kind of like Trial of Valor was a little bit higher than Emerald Nightmare. Those 2 bosses drop slightly higher item level base gear compared to Battle of Dazar'alor.
Okay.
But I think we'll make that final decision when we see what the average item level of active raiders is at when it comes time to open the raid.
Okay, cool. Faction assaults combined with the war mode are really fun, and before patch 8.1 war mode wasn't that exciting, especially as an alliance player.
Yes.
Now it's better, but still not perfect. Like sharding with disappearing and appearing players is one problem, or the fact that the looking for dungeon tool is not able to filter players with or without war mode enabled. Like you always have to write it up if you have war mode on or off. And it's also hard to play with friends if they don't have war mode enabled. Like you want to summon someone, for example, and then you have to check, probably what I'm talking about. Do you have any further plans to improve the system?
I mean, those are all, I agree, those are all challenges. I think some of them are also just a part of the restrictions that enable the system to exist in the first place. In terms of summoning, you can summon people who are in the opposite war mode setting as you, but you just need somebody else to help click with you, right?
Yeah,
2 people can get together to a summoning stone, summon a group mate who is in war mode when they're not, and that person will get summoned. For outdoor content, it should automatically filter groups according to war mode. Like if you're looking for a group to do a world quest and you have war mode on, it won't show people who don't have war mode on. Now, if you're looking to do a Mythic Plus or some other content that's instanced, then yes, it'll mix war mode and non-war mode, but the only thing that really should impact is some minor challenges while summoning. The the way it works with sharding is ultimately what enables war mode to exist. Because I think if it were in the old school way, if it were more server based, so many of our realms at this point are very, very imbalanced. They're very heavy horde dominated or very heavy alliance dominated. And that was one of the reasons why we introduced war mode to begin with, because world PvP was becoming increasingly, honestly, almost non-existent, because even on PvP servers, there were such faction imbalances that it was just an unpleasant experience. And then the outnumbered faction felt like they were just trapped there and often felt like they needed to pay for a server transfer if they wanted to escape. Mm-hmm. War mode gives everybody a chance to decide whether they want a PvP experience or not. And we have to bring people together from different servers to make relatively balanced shards that have both horde and alliance present. And so sharding definitely causes some inconveniences in the outdoor world gameplay, but we think what it enables with war mode PvP is worth it.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about, because when I did the world boss last week, I had this issue with war mode on, war mode off, because I was looking for a group in the dungeon browser, and somehow that doesn't work, because you mentioned it earlier.
Interesting. So if you're in the custom group section, then that you have to put the information in manually. But if you're doing a world quest, like if you go to where the world boss is and you just click the green eye, that setting should completely respect war mode or not, and won't match you across settings.
Well, good to know, because I for myself didn't know that. But yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we should do a better job of documenting that for sure. I think the challenge with custom groups is we don't know what the custom can be anything, right? You could be putting together a transmog run or something else that shouldn't respect war mode. So we just let players put the information in themselves.
Okay. Legion was all about class identity. There have been class order halls, legendaries, class campaigns, artifacts, and so on. And I think a lot of players were really happy about it, like us, for example. Yes. It felt like our heroes were really important, and now in Battle for Azeroth there's almost nothing like that. We don't really have an identity anymore or an connection to our character that we have been in Legion, like just one expansion apart. Earlier, like we are in now, and no real progress in our character development. Why did you decide to go this way, like this difference between Legion and BFA?
I think part of it is the stories of the expansions. I think Legion began with the factions failing and breaking almost. They failed at the Broken Shore, and what rose to fill that void were the class order halls. And so it was very much an expansion focused, as you note, on class identity. Battle for Azeroth is focused more on faction identity, on being Horde, on being Alliance, on what that means. We're also looking at racial identity with things like heritage armor lines that are being introduced. Now, class identity remains important. It's just not a central focus of the expansion. I think we're still, whether it's improving the visual fidelity of classes like what Holy Paladins received in Tides of Vengeance, or just finding ways to make you feel special for playing a shaman or a warlock or a rogue. That's something we're always looking to do. I mean, we understand that players view Azeroth, view World of Warcraft through the lens of the class they play, and that's super important. But we don't think it can always be the center of every story we're telling.
That's true. That's understandable. Well, thanks. From Warlords to Legion, a lot of the talent trees changed from utility-oriented roles, where a lot of them were used in a few situations or based on player preferences, to having many throughput roles with relatively few utility roles. If you know what I'm...
perhaps, yes, I think.
How do you think that has worked out, and is it a design decision you'd consider revisiting?
Yeah, I'm not sure there was a conscious decision to move away from utility. And I think throughput rows, part of the value there is to give players control over some of their strengths and weaknesses, or just customizing their rotation a little bit. Do you prefer a more proc-driven gameplay style, or do you want something that's simpler and more passive, or do you want an all-new ability to include in your rotation? And so I think when we can give players those choices, that lets people find something that feels best for them within the given specialization. Also, for higher end players, they'll be able to customize themselves to excel in different situations, depending on whether they're doing a dungeon or PvP or a specific boss encounter that favors a certain talent. Utility, I think we've certainly tried to move away from mixing utility and throughput, because when we put a utility option against something that is just making you do more damage or heal more effectively, those often don't feel like interesting decisions. So that may be some of the changes that we've made. Other aspects of it are just making sure that we're not homogenizing classes too much, that we're not, if, with one of the dangers with utility is if everyone has access to everything, then people feel less special with their individual tools. And so we've pulled away from some of the talents that were, giving classes abilities that really were traditionally not, that were more traditionally weaknesses. Someone has to be very mobile, someone has to be less good at movement. Demon hunters and monks are at the high end of the spectrum there, and classes like Death Knights or Paladins are a bit less mobile. They still have talents like Divine Steed or Death's Advance, but that's not supposed to be their strength. And so in the past, where maybe they had a few more movement options than really were appropriate for that class, that was something that was actually taking away from their identity.
Talking about talents, why did you convert so many baseline abilities and passives of different classes into talents? For example, Affliction Warlock's talents are 70% something we already saw like 2 expansions ago as baseline spells. Like, for example, Lingering Insanity and Shadowbird Death for Shadow Priests are on the same level like the Affliction Warlocks.
Yeah, so a lot of that was done in past expansions, like in Warlords and Legion. There's definitely, we talked about this at length at the time as part of just general pruning, looking at where we had ended up adding new abilities to classes every expansion for 10 years, and classes having 30, 40 abilities in their spellbook, where you almost didn't, you barely had enough keybind space for them, and a lot of these abilities were very niche and narrow in their use. As we removed things, we heard a lot of feedback from passionate players that loved certain abilities, and that led us to try to find a way to give people the choice, if they like those abilities, to be able to keep them. So I think that's how baseline abilities ended up turning into talents. But that's, I think, a product of a philosophy that was really of higher priority for us a few years ago. When we sit around today, we don't think that classes have too many abilities. That's not a problem we're trying to solve. And I think we're open to adding baseline abilities, to moving things back to baseline where it makes sense. And so I think it's more a product of what the team was focused on, maybe during Warlords and early Legion, less so about Battle for Azeroth.
Okay. Let's talk about the future.
Sure.
The next big thing is going to be patch 8.2, and the biggest highlight on your presentation was Nashiata. But it was also a really cool surprise to see Mecca Khan?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, Mecca Khan.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Like, is it just a new mega dungeon, or is it a new zone? And if so, what are we going to do there?
So I think I have to apologize in advance. I'm probably not going to say too much more than what we said at BlizzCon. But just to clarify, yes, Mecca Khan is a second smaller zone than Nashiata, which is the main zone for Rise of Ashara.
Okay.
There's a mega dungeon that is similar to Karazhan, just as we said at BlizzCon. I think we'll have a ton more information to share on all of the details there, and what you're going to be doing, and what the rewards are, and what the story is in the not too distant future. I think after 8.15 is out and off PTR, as we've come to expect, we'll probably see Rise of Ashara going up on the PTR not too long after that, and we'll have tons of information to share at that point.
Okay. Can we talk about mecha gnomes and allied races?
I mean, we can. You can talk about it. I'm not sure I'm going
to. Okay.
I mean, there's a lot that I think it's always exciting to see people get interested in and speculate about what the next allied race is going to be and what would be cool to play. We still haven't necessarily finalized every single one of those decisions, so it's exciting to hear feedback from the community about what is most exciting to them.
Okay. It sounded like you want to try something new with Nashiata, or combine a lot of things from other endgame zones. At BlizzCon, you said we will see something new every day, most likely for a specific period of time. Could you give us some examples of how you want to achieve this?
Like I said, unfortunately, not quite yet. I think our focus right now is on 8.15 and getting that polished up and getting that into players' hands. We'll have a lot more to talk about the details of that. But yes, just to underscore what Jeremy said at BlizzCon, I think the goal with Nashiata is to learn from everything that we've done in our past endgame outdoor zones, whether it's Argus, whether it's Broken Shore, whether it's just standard endgame world quests and level up, and kind of improve upon and combine the best of all of those worlds.
Probably the question was too far into the future. Well,
No,
sorry
no,
for
no
that.
problem at all.
Probably there are rares and treasure chests again on these two zones. And to be honest, treasure chests on Kulrias and Sandala are pretty boring because you
What?
just
Yeah.
open them and you get a bit of war resources and you don't really need them. Rares and treasure chests are not really rare at all, and there is no reason for us players to open them if we want to talk honest about it. In the past, it was always a good feeling to find a chest or a rare enemy. Like I remember in Wallet of Dreno when we first just visited the zones and everywhere were rare spawns and you killed them the first time and it was like, wow, there is rare and stuff like that. But now it's just like, oh look, there is a star on the mini map. And do you think we can see some more really rare things in the future again that are more
Yes.
exciting?
So I agree with your criticism completely. I think the treasures were better in Warlords. I think there were some problems with finding a pixel that was a ring at the bottom of a riverbed where you had to find the exact right pixel to click to loot the treasure. But having them tell more of a story, more varied rewards, that was a better system, and it's something we'd like to move back to in the future. When it comes to rares, those are tricky. I think we haven't really had true rares since Mist of Pandaria. I think even in Warlords, in a world where you can join cross-server groups, I mean, even sharding notwithstanding, the second you can join cross-server groups, which opens up tons of gameplay, the right way to hunt for true rare spawns often ended up being just server hopping. I remember back in Warlords, when we had rares in Tanan Jungle, people wouldn't actually move around looking for them. They would just sit at their spawn location and look for groups to join that had them up. So those are some of the challenges that we face when trying to create that type of gameplay. It's something we're looking to do and actually may start to experiment with again in Rise of Ashara and beyond. But I agree with you that there's something very cool about that experience of a truly rare spawn that you come across, and that's just exciting to see.
Okay, cool. Another thing that people are talking about very often. Are we going to see something like the Mage Tower in Ashiatar, or maybe at some further future? So class-specific solo challenges?
I think we were very happy with how the Mage Tower turned out in Legion. It's
It was
something
awesome.
Yes, it's something we'd love to do again in the future. I think we don't want to turn it into this formulaic thing where, like, okay, every expansion we have the new Mage Tower. I think it's important that there be a good reason for it, that there be something exciting to reward from doing it, that it kind of fits into the context of the world. But we're definitely not done with that type of solo challenge. I think it was a huge success, a ton of fun, and we want to do it again.
Yeah, people and we loved it. I don't know, it just felt like a good thing to do something for your character and just solo stuff. It's
Exactly.
pretty cool. You announced heroic Wolfruns at BlizzCon for 8.2. Can you tell us a little bit more about the difference to the normal mode? For us, Wolfruns are an interesting concept, but to be honest, they're just too easy and too straightforward every time to be fun. And we don't think it's even possible to lose a match. I don't really know if
it is possible. It's happened. It's unlikely. I mean, the Warfronts experience that you have on live today is really it's basically like an LFR encounter. Right, it's effectively looking for raid, and that's the audience, and that's the tuning. As we explained at BlizzCon, I think the gist of Heroic Warfronts is to create, the normal raid experience that is designed for a pre-made group that is coordinating and turn that into something that a group of friends can do together. Is it going to be a super challenge for a Mythic raid group? No, that's not that's not something that we're trying to do here. But we want to make it a more involved, coordinated experience. And we'll have a ton more information to share on that, again, as Rise of Ashara actually hits PTR and we move our attention there. So that's, just wanted to clarify what we said at BlizzCon.
Okay, so maybe my next question would be irrelevant because you haven't announced a new Wolfrun for patch 8.2 yet. Will there be no one in this update, in the upcoming one?
We're not planning on a new Warfront in Rise of Ashara, but Heroic Warfronts will be what fills that vacuum.
Okay, can you say something about the Barons, for example, we heard about some time ago? There was a speculation that Barons might be a new Warfront at some point, and
that was a very, very, that's not a thing we have planned. That was a very early internal prototype when we were first beginning development on Battle for Azeroth. Before we had any of the new areas to play with, some designers tried some of these concepts out in the Barons, And there was some, most of that stuff was taken out because it was never even made it to alpha. It was just an internal test. But there was some strings and some pieces of it that were still data mined. So
it was
that is
interesting
the mystery.
to write about, because everyone was like, there is a new Warfront and we heard something and stuff like that. And, yeah. Do you have any further plans for crafting? Because we think we've never heard a single player saying World of Warcraft has a good profession system. It's really boring. I don't want to say boring like in a negative way, but
I understand.
And some would even say it's useless because there are a lot of bind on pickup items, no real perks or even rare recipes, and there are a lot of games out there with good examples for a better crafting system. Do you have anything like?
It's an area we're always looking to improve. Nothing specific to share right now, but I think historically the most successful crafting professions in World of Warcraft, I think, have always been the ones that sell consumable trade skills. Like I think alchemy works pretty well, alchemy and herbalism or enchanting, where you feel like, yeah, you're creating potions and flasks, and there's a steady demand for these. You can use them yourself. You share them with your guild. You can make a lot of money selling them on the auction house. I think blacksmithing, leatherworking, tailoring have always been the more challenging ones because the gear they create always competes with every other source of gear in the game. And the big challenge there is, well, if you can get crafted gear that's better than raid gear or equal to raid gear routinely, then just go to the auction house with a lot of gold and buy a full set of crafted gear, and now you don't need to raid, and now you're just as strong as any other endgame player. Or if they're weaker, then, well, now crafting feels useless. So part of what we've tried to do there historically is some bind on pickup items that require materials from dungeons and raids. It's been the case going all the way back to Burning Crusade. We see people now, in the new Tides of Vengeance season, going in to get their title cores and try to craft their
new recipes and
pieces.
Stuff like,
Exactly. But there's a lot of, we see that as an area with a ton of opportunity for improvement. I think the possibilities for progression and really the fantasy of being a blacksmith and having that be something that you feel like you can specialize in, and you can actually be a better blacksmith than other blacksmiths because of that effort and that dedication. That's something that we agree we're definitely falling short on, and we'd like to do better in the future.
Okay, cool.
Hey, just real quick, sorry to interrupt, but we're pretty much out of time at this point. If we got time for one more quick question.
Sure.
Okay, cool, thanks. In terms of sound, zone design, and atmosphere, Kulturas and Sunda are just beautiful. It's really awesome to see Borealis at night, for example, or walking in Stormsong Valley with the sun rises, and it's pretty cool. Seeing this and traveling back to Classic or the old zones, just it feels like we are playing a complete different game. And if we just see Arathi Highlands and Darkshore and the overhaul of those zones, it's pretty cool. And can we get more of these ramps? This revamps, sorry.
I mean, when you say it's like playing a different game, to a large extent, it almost is, right? You're going back to things that were made literally 10 years ago in a lot of cases, and the new zones always, they showcase the improvements in technology and the way in which our art has just continued to push itself forward. The big challenge, as we saw in Cataclysm, redoing an old zone is it's a very large undertaking, and it takes away from resources that could go into making brand new content for the end game. And so it's not something we can just say, okay, we're just going to do this. We're always looking for reasons to do it. We're always looking for excuses. I think anytime we're setting a meaningful piece of new content in the old world, we're going to want to go back and update the fidelity, make it look better, make it look like it fits better into the modern game. That's what we saw with Darkshore. That's what we saw with Arathi. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised to see us continuing that treatment to select zones where it makes sense, and maybe over time a larger portion of that old world feels more consistent with the modern one. But it's hard to imagine me in any time in the near future saying, well, okay, instead of making new zones for a new expansion, we're going to take this time and just go back and make Westfall look cooler. I don't think that would be in players' best interests overall.
No, I don't think so as well. But yeah, we are really liking the new zones and the new stuff you did for the 2 zones.
Awesome. Right. Very glad to hear.
Cool. Thanks for your time and thanks for the interview. It was really great to talk to you.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. These are really great questions. I really appreciate it.
Cool.